Hi everyone, it is Azure First Days again, and we are happy to welcome you to this evening's stream. We have three amazing speakers tonight. We start off with Dawood Idris. He's a software developer and the CEO of TechCloud, and he's going to help us build a web app with Cosmos DB and Node.js on Azure. Next, we have Scott Hanselman, and we all know him, of course. But he's a programmer and a teacher and a speaker, and he's going to tell us how he moves his whole Hanselman online mess to Azure. At last, we have Carol Rennie Logan, and she's going to talk about how you can get started with Blazor.
Cool, that seems like three really great sessions. So welcome everyone also from my side, and thank you so much for joining the Azure Thursday. Still 4 minutes before we start, so I wanted to talk with you about the prizes you can win. You might have seen it already in the chat. That is on your left or right hand. I don't know where to point, but on one of these sides. So what are we going to do? There is going to be a link, which I'm showing on the screen now. You can fill in that form. But to fill in that form, you need to gather 3 secret codes that we are going to show you throughout the meetup. So in every talk, you will get 1 code. So you will have to look at all the talks. Then you fill in the form, you submit it, and we will pick everyone out, and then we will use a random generator name picker to draw the prizes. So be aware, these prizes are shipped from the UK, and they are from our sponsor. And the sponsor is Squared Up, and they're shipped from the UK. So if you apply and you win and we ship them, you need to pay import taxes probably. So be aware of that when you fill in the form. As you see, I think below us, you see that we have Billy, and Billy will help us interpret it or do sign language for our complete meetup. So let us know what you find of that in the chat, and if you want to see it in more episodes. So I want to invite our first guest, Dawood. I will add him to the stream. Hi, Dawood.
Hi, Hank. I'm doing awesome. I'm doing great. And nice to have me here.
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Hi,
it
welcome.
Must be a nice day for you, because my Twitter feed was like exploding because you tagged me in something.
I actually noticed it. So earlier on yesterday, I think later on I had to avoid, replying and tagging you because I was like, oh, today you're going to get like 5,000 messages already. I'm so sorry for messing up though.
I felt very popular.
Yeah, actually, you're the most popular guy. Yeah,
so
actually, I think it was a good news to me and then to the community, and that Hank actually, I think it was 2 months back, we had the Global AI virtual on tour. And while I was hosting the session, I was a speaker. So I was speaking on, AI and how people could easily understand it, right? And right after I was done, I received an email in my box saying that I've been nominated. And I was like, wow, what's on earth? I didn't imagine it coming. I didn't see it coming. I didn't request for it. And gone like 2019, when people said I should become an MVP, and I was looking for someone to nominate me. But here lies someone who nominated me. So so I was nominated, and yesterday, whilst I was in a call with Maxim Muller, and a cloud advocate, and I saw the email saying congratulations. So congratulations to me and Hank and everyone within the community, because this was our effort, right?
Yeah, it is very good, and it's a great thing for the community to have you on board.
Yeah.
So, but before you joined, you are or still am a Microsoft student partner, and I think many of our viewers heard and know what Microsoft MVPs are. But I don't think everyone knows what the student partners do. So can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, extremely yes. So actually, Microsoft has what is known as the community leaders, right? So the community leaders is made up of MVPs, Microsoft Most Valuable Professionals, MSPs, Microsoft Student Partners, and then regional, directors, RDPs. All right. So these three, people form, the Microsoft community leaders. So if you're an MSP, then you might be a student. You should be a student, enroll in the university, and then you can apply with on studentambassadors.microsoft.com, and you go through a process of scrutiny, and you would be accepted based on your contributions. So with MSPs, our main job is actually to spread positivity and to spread technology throughout our campuses and then across the country as much as we can, from campus to citywide. So that is simply what the MSP program is about.
That is nice. That is nice. Is it also connected to like the Imagine Cup, or is that something completely different?
Oh, awesome. So I needed to put this down. So you see Imagine Cup there. Yeah, so we have Imagine Cup and we have the Student Partner Program, and we are very lucky to have Pablo Veramendi, who is the same program manager for both programs, right? So it's two separate things, but then the MSP program, being led by the Imagine Cup, manager. The same time, we help promote the Imagine Cup to students, because obviously Imagine Cup is for students, so it's just great that student ambassadors would help promote it to our campuses.
That is nice. That is good. So I see it is like 6:30 here in the Netherlands, where the Azure Thursday is founded from. What are you going to talk about?
So today my main focus is actually going to be about Microsoft has one of these biggest computer in the world, right? Not even Microsoft, but there's this biggest computer in the world called Azure. And this computer has tons of resource, making it so much easy, has like tons of setup and configurations already for you, and you can consume most of this as services, right? So we are going to leverage our skills that we have in Node.js to try to see how exactly we can connect our application, which is on our desktop, to this biggest computer in the world called Microsoft Azure. So we would have a database sitting in the cloud, and then we will try to communicate with it.
Cool. Is it going to involve a live demo?
Yes, it will actually involve a live demo. So I wanted to do something like build up the whole code, and I was like, no, we are going to have newcomers joining us today, right? I want them to go away with inspiration, right? I want them to go away with the fact that they can actually start their Node.js journey, because it is just when someone shows it to you and tell you how easy it is, then you can actually do it. So I'll try to start from scratch, but maybe in the middle part I'll try to because we don't have much time, I'll just show a complete application and how exactly it looks like to connect to such databases.
Perfect. Cool. Then you can share your screen.
Yes, absolutely.
Good luck.
Thank you.
If you have any questions for the Wood, you can ask them in the chat. We have also on this player, we are using a new player. You can use some subtitles as well. Good luck.
Awesome. So let me know if you can see my screen. Then we'll be up and running. Hank, you can confirm to me if you see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen. So take it
away.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think just because we are, trying to target everyone within, the world, I'll just begin from scratch, all right? So you probably might have heard of Node.js, right? And Node.js is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. And on top of Node.js, a lot of, frameworks have actually been built, right? One of the most popular framework is actually called Express. I'm going to show you Express right now. So this is Express. If you go to npm.js package /Express, you would be able to see it. Now look at something. How many weekly downloads do we have so far, right? that's about 12 million, which means a large amount of people are actually within the the Node community and are consuming Express, which means when you begin your journey, you would actually get help whenever needed. So we're going to be using this particular framework, and mostly when we talk about Node.js, mostly you see this main stack, which is MongoDB, Express, probably Angular, and also Node.js itself. So we are going to be using Node.js as our database. All right. So if you're new to it, don't worry. I'll just try to begin from scratch, and then I'll show you the final product. All right. So let's start. So to begin with Node.js, you actually need to download this Node.js application right in here. Once you download it in your download folder, you will actually see it here as part of it. You just need to double click on it to start installing. Once you're done installing, you'll be good to go. One thing that you need to also take care of is to actually install GitHub, right? Git bash for your desktop, so that you're able to communicate with your version control, your GitHub account itself. And also, if you want, you can actually install MongoDB easily. But one good thing that Azure actually gives us is that with with Azure Cosmos DB, which is actually it takes the administrative task from us. So for example, I would have installed MongoDB on my desktop, but I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to go into Microsoft Azure, and then I'll create a MongoDB database over there. So I'm just going to log into portal.azure.com. I'll create a resource. I'll click on that, create a resource, and I will scroll down to databases. I will scroll down a bit more to Azure Cosmos DB. Once I click on Azure Cosmos DB, so this is a globally distributed multimodal, fully managed database service. So whether you want to actually use whatever being your use case, you'll be able to get an API that connects to that perfect database that you want. For example, you could connect to Cassandra, Azure Table, and Cosmos DB. You can read more about this. But today we are going to focus on MongoDB. Then immediately we need to just create an account, right? So we need to give our account a name. Okay, so maybe I'm going to call this to do build. Okay, so today we are going to build a to-do application. That is what we are going to try to do. And every other thing, I'll just leave it to the default. But because Microsoft Azure is a huge computer and has a lot of resource, everything that you create, you need to put it in a resource group, all right? So that you are able to manage it easily. So I'll just put this in one of the resource group I created. However, you can just click on this particular create new to create a new resource. And once you are done, I will scroll down, leave the location to be somewhere nearer to me. And if I, also enable geo redundancy, this particular data would also be replicated in this in East US. All right. So I will just leave everything default, and I'll click on create, review, and create for now. Once I'm done with that, it will just review to see whether I'm good to go. And if I'm good to go, then I would, be able to click on create. When I click on create, it will take some, minutes, and then it will get, installed for us. So this is probably the good way. Let's now begin, building a Node application. Okay. So Scott is going to tell you something. You check up on some of his blog, and Scott actually has this amazing thing called Windows Terminal push that he wrote. It allows you to actually see, have a feel of a real terminal, right? You can open multiple tasks and all that. That's really fun. So I'm just going to navigate into my desktop folder, and I think I have a folder called CodeMon. I think I should probably try listing it before, see whether I really have. Oh, okay, it's called CodeMon. So I would just go into my CodeMon folder. I'll clear everything. I think one thing I'm going to try to do is actually to make a folder, all right? Make a directory. This directory is going to be called to-do build, all right? So this is the application I'm trying to build, okay? Then I can then navigate into that particular to-do build folder. If you feel I'm actually going fast, trust me, this session is recorded. You can rewatch it again, all right? But try your best to follow along, okay? I'm going to take it incremental step to make sure you understand everything. So to start building a node application, you need to run, npm init. All right. And then you supply it with the -y flag. So this will give us, a template to start on, a package.json file. And because we already know that we also we need to install Express as one of the popular framework, I'm just going to install that in here, okay? Once I'm done with that, the next thing I'm going to try to do is actually to pull in another package, which I will explain to you why I'm actually pulling it in. So let's put that package in. Okay, and I'm going to save that particular package so that when I push everything to live, that particular package doesn't get installed at all. So I'll just, save it to my dev dependency, and I'll call it, it is actually called NodeMon. All right, I'll tell you why I'm pulling this guy in. All right. So imagine that everything is done successfully. It means that we can actually open our VS Code, our test editor, and begin to code. So let's open that. So I'm just going to open that with this. All right. And you can see it displayed right in here for me. Cool. So what do we have? So far we've created a folder called to do build. We've actually pulled in a package.json file. Our package.json file has helped us to pull in, Express and also NodeMon. All right. So NodeMon will just help us to make sure it will just keep an eye on all of our files. Should we make any changes that are not really going well, it is going to prompt us. Okay. So what do we have to do next is that I'm just going to create a folder. This folder is going to be called SLC, which is a source folder. All right. This source folder will contain all, files, that like my source code. So the first code I really need is actually the index.js. You can see that my package.json file is actually saying that you actually have, your entry point to be the index.js. All right. So I'll just create that. Once I have that, I can then pull in, the Express package that I want. I can pull it in. And remember, we just installed this particular, package. So we've put it in successfully. What we can also do is to, create an instance, right? A copy of this particular Express app. So we would just, assign it to the Express instance. So once we have this, it means that we can then tell our application that, hey, boy, listen when anyone mentions 3000, okay? And I will then pass in a function, callback function, which will basically say to us whether or not we are connected or not, and then the port that we are connected to. So I'm going to say, hey, guy. No, I say, hey, folks, rather. Try to be very inclusive. And I will say, listen to, and I will just connect to, the port that I'm listening to, which is port, I'll just say localhost. Oh, sorry. And probably give it, the path, which is going to say that boy 3000. Okay. So this is actually giving us a good start. So as of now, we can pull in, we can go back to, our terminal to keep doing this because I actually love this interface. Thanks to Scott for, that block. So I'm going to pull in right here in VS Code. I'm going to pull in the terminal, and I can then run that I want to start this particular application. Before we do that, let's also make sure that we are actually going to our script. And then we write that when someone mentions, dev, then it should basically call on NodeMon and then call the source folder and call the index.js file. Okay, so once we have this, we can then come down here and then we try to run npm should run the dev for us. Okay, and you can see that our app is live. Hey, you just actually wrote, your first Node application, and then you're already connecting to the server. What more can we do? I'm really going to focus on, making sure that we have database pulled in, because that is the main agenda of this particular session. So to do that, I'm going to create a folder, and then this folder is going to be called setup. When I create my setup folder, I will then create another file, a file in there called database. And I actually love this way of writing the code, because I actually I think this is quite organized as well. So I love this way. Okay, so this database file is going to help us to set up our database, and then whatever file that we keep adding to this setup file or whatever here, we'll just keep notifying our index.js file that, hey, I just pulled in this guy, so that our app is, well notified of everything, happening. Did you get the idea? So what I'm going to do is to now open another Powershell, and then I would then create that I will tell my app that, hey, please pull in someone for me. And this particular person is going to be called MongoDB. Okay, so npm install MongoDB. This would pull in MongoDB for us. So MongoDB package would help us to be able to, connect to our database that we've deployed in here. Okay, so database account to do is not online, no problem. Let's see what happens. Okay. So for now, let me just drop down so I don't make you confused. So I just put in, MongoDB. Once I actually put in MongoDB, the next thing I'm going to try to do is that when someone is sending a request from, the browser to our application, we need some sort of a middleman, all right? Now, this middleman would be able to interpret and say that, okay, this particular, data that was passed, let's just, make it a JSON format so that our application is able to understand and fetch data from database and make all the manipulation logic and return it back to the person, all right? So to do that, we need to pull in a particular package called, this package is actually called body parser. Okay, so body parser will do all those, middleman job for us. Okay, so once I have it in here, I'm going to come to my database and I'll pull in, I'll create a middleware. Don't worry, I said middleman, but actually I mean middleware. All right, so that was just an attempt to help you understand. And I'll create a middleware, file. So now that I actually have this particular middleware pulled in, I will create a variable called body parser, and I'll require it in. And once I do that, I'll then call my body parser in here. All right, so now we have body parser in the particular file. So every file within this setup, we are going to export it, okay? So I will just call model.export. I'll just tell model, please export, a function. And when you are exporting the function, okay, so this is ES6 syntax. When you are exporting the function, please make sure that you tell my application to use the body parser, all right? So I'll call body parser and say JSON, all right? So this makes sense a lot, which means that this is a function that we are going to use, and then we are going to pass in app, and then we will tell the app that please use this guy, all right? So I'll save my file, and then I can now go to my index.js. Whatever file that we are actually pulling in, we have a nice name to give it. Thanks to Kathy for this, actually. And then I will pull in set up, middleware. All right, middleware. All right, then I will just require in that particular file we just created, which is inside here, and I'll call in middleware. All right, which means now we have the middleware function existing within our application. Okay, let me try not to mess up this guy. Okay. Okay, I think I just tried to mess him up a bit, but I'll then come back to my index.js. And you can see the setup middleware is now a function. So we can call this function and then, sorry. Oh, hey, copy this guy again. And then I'll just pass in the app. Once, I have the setup middleware function called, I am passing in the app to this particular middleware, all right? The next thing is that we just want to connect to the database. That's the most important thing we are doing in this particular episode. So I'll pull in MongoDB. All right, then, so you can see that the format is basically the same. I want you to feel this is way easy to learn, right? And would then, model export. Remember, I told you earlier that we would export every file in here, all right? So when exporting this guy, I'm just going to say that, hello, when exporting, please make sure that, you export the MongoDB for me, okay? So I'm going to declare a function called client. And this function called client is going to call the MongoDB and Mongo clients, all right? And yeah, so it will create a new instance of the Mongo client, okay? So I'm going to new this guy up. Once I new this guy up, I'm going to come down here, and then I would say that, hey, I need to declare a variable called URI, okay? And this is probably not going to be the best way to connect, to put your URI, your endpoint in your application, but this would actually work, all right? This would do the job for us because I'm really trying that everyone should be able to take something out of here. Then I'll then create a database name. So this database name is actually going to be called to-do appdb, okay? And once I have the name in here and I have the Mongo client, the next thing I can actually do is to call this particular Mongo client and then tell it that, hey, Mongo client, please do some bit of stuff for me. But I'm going to call this function called async, all right? Anytime you have async, it only means that you are you've been promised to receive some particular value, from elsewhere, all right, from a thread. Then I'll just call in, the await function and say that, hey, when I'm waiting for a function to actually return, please return the client connect to me, all right? Once you actually return the client, I want to return this particular client to my application, right? So I'll call client.db. Okay, then I can pass in the database name. You remember, right? So I created a variable and added it here. Okay, so this is way better, a way to actually connect to, your database. Let me see whether I'm making sense here. Or I'm actually, okay, so the next thing is that we need to pass in the URI, right? The link to connect to our database, which is in the cloud. Then we'll pass in a particular, URI, which is very important. It is called use unified topology. Okay, so now if we don't pass in this, it is actually going to throw an error to us. So I'm going to call that particular use unified topology to be true. Okay, so at this point, we can screw up. This is all that we've done. Let me pull this guy down a bit. Okay, so to connect to our database, we know that whenever we call this particular file, it's going to return a database instance for us, right? So to do that, let's just come back to our file here. And then we const set up middleware. Sorry, I think we are setting up database, right? So that actually makes sense a lot. So we require in this guy, and then I will just say that, hey, please put in the file that we just created, which is a database. So our database is going to be here. And once the database is called, it would actually have something really cool to return to us, which is actually the DB instance coming in. So to start, I'm going to create an async function again. Okay, and this function is going to be called start. And once I have the start function called in here, I'm going to make sure that I await for the database instance that is coming in. Okay, remember, this is going to be a function which is actually returning a database instance to our application. So I'm going to create a particular variable called db to represent the database, instance that is coming into application. And when I have it, I can actually console log the database instance. Okay. So by now you should be asking me a question. Where is this URI that Dawood is actually connecting to? So I'm going to cut this particular function and then paste it in here, saying that until the start function is called and database connection is established, please do not call my, start my server until everything is ready. So I'll then console.log. Okay. I'll console the error itself so that we're able to see if there's any error, we just, catch that particular error. Okay, so this is actually making a huge amount of sense by now. And you can see all that we are doing is just, setting up our application. And I'm sure this should be really easy for you. For now, I'm just going to skip this deployment resource Node.js field. I think I might have some error somewhere, but that is a way to create, a MongoDB API and then connect to it. So I have one deployed successfully. We have less time to actually go. I'll just call this particular, one that I created earlier. And once, you deploy your Cosmos DB, which is your MongoDB on it, you can then scroll down and say connection string, okay? So connection string will basically give you the URI to connect to. The URI I'm going to connect to is actually the primary connection string. And I'll paste that particular URI inside my database file. I'm going to scroll up. Okay, so if you already know about, Node.js, I'm sure probably you've seen a different way of actually putting the pieces, in separate files. And if you are new to it, please don't worry, don't get confused. You can watch it the second time and everything should be clear, all right? Like magic, right? So now I can then call, NodeMon. NodeMon should be running already in here. And if you have any error, okay, see in here, okay? When this start function was called, already NodeMon is telling us that you've already connected to a database. So see, we've actually connected to our database, which is in Azure, right? So we already have a database connection established. So this is way easier to create a database within the cloud, create a MongoDB, and then also create your Node.js application, and then find a way of easily connecting to this particular application. Remember, we console.log it. That is why everything is showing in here. I'm sure you're going to have some questions from me, so I'm going to try to answer it, all right? But for now, I wish we could go more. Now, the only thing I want to tell you is that learning never stops here, so we can do something more on our own if you enjoy the session. So let's just do one more thing, all right? Let me just show you one more, scaffoldings that we could do. So now we have middleware, and then we put in the middleware at the top. Now, when we had the middleware, we put it at the top before the database and everything so that our application will get noticed that we have a middleware in here, all right? Then one thing that we can do is to create in our setup file something called router. Okay, so router basically takes care of saying that, hey, if someone visits /register, the endpoint called register or login, then it should route to a specific resource, pull in all the resources that it needed, and then, bring it back to the person who is calling for it, provided that the person is authenticated or has right to actually access that particular data, right? So if you want to create a router, it's just very simple. So you just say router, then you actually require in, Express. So Express kind of helps us to do all the routing stuff, okay? And this could be our router instance. So we call our router. Remember, the basic flow is that we always have a model.export. And then whilst exporting this guy, we would, then also say that, hey, when exporting, okay, I need to create a new instance called a router. Okay, so I'll call off router. I'll call new router. Okay, so I'll also notify my app that, hey, I have, a router in here. Okay, so app.use, tell my app that, hey, please use router. Okay, so router is being used in here, and you can see this router is just what we created here. So with this in mind, you can actually do some, requests like, .post and all that. So in here, you can then define what particular endpoint you want to connect to. Maybe you are pulling in, because we are doing to do, maybe you are doing some tasks, right? So this should pull in all tasks for you, okay? So this is going to help you pull in all tasks. Then you just pass in a valid, a spread handler here and say that, hey, when someone tries to connect, let's get the request, and then we will respond accordingly. So in here, we are simply going to say that console.log the particular request that the person is trying to do. So over here, we could do database, connections and everything, manipulate our data. But we're just going to say that, hey, you got here. All right, so I'll pass in maybe a message, and I would say that connected, or you got here, or you got sent, any of it. Okay, so with this in mind, when anyone visits, a Postman, when anyone uses Postman to try to make an, a request to this particular endpoint, we are simply going to have, the person served with, connected. So this is port number 3000. Okay, so I'm just going to call the local host and possibly say port number 3000. Okay, so to learn more about, building good Node apps, you can actually check on catifran.com. And Maxim also has one good, tutorial he did, which I learned from. So with this in mind, you can actually make a push endpoint, request to this particular endpoint. If we did everything successfully, then we should have connected, right? Okay, so we need to connect to the particular endpoint, which was a task. Let me see. So what are we missing in here? Let's see. Okay, I'm going to go back to here. Try to see what we are missing. So we have localhost, we have port number 3000, and then we have task. All right. So this should be way easier and way better ways for us to connect. Let me see. What are we not doing right? You probably might have even figured it out before me. But this is actually a better way to always, oh, you know what? We actually have router, but have we actually put in router into our application? So this is a good lesson, right? That you should always remember to require, the files that you are creating within your setup to exist within your, your application. So good lesson learned. Let's always make sure that we have, put in our setup file and we'll be good to go. So I'm going to end this lesson here. And my name is Dawood Idris. If you want to learn more about Node application, web application in general, just keep in touch with me on Twitter, everywhere. That's my name, but on YouTube, I actually run sessions as well. So we were pulling in the router, so we probably would do something like / go to the setup and say that we need, that particular router. And you can even see that we messed up by putting the router elsewhere, so it doesn't even exist here. So that means we need to jump a pace step, backwards to be able to catch up on that particular router. All right. So let me see. Is my time up already? Yes, it's up. If you have any question, drop it in the chat. I will try to answer, and we'll be on the same page. But hopefully, this is way better to connect to your database. We separated a file called database, and then also we had a URI connecting with a connection string. The best way to actually do it is actually to store it in your environment, variable, so that you just connect. You don't expose this to everyone, okay? And if you want to actually add one last thing to your application, which is actually a get ignore file to help you not to push everything, you just have to create a .ignore file, get ignore file, and then come to your browser, visit this particular URL, and then you would see series of files, which gives you all the files that you can ignore whilst you are pushing to source control. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for this great session, Dawood. Really nice. Yeah. We have one question from the audience for you.
Awesome.
Does Cosmos DB access need any firewall ports opening? For example, yeah?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, right?
Yeah.
Now, the point is that whilst we were trying to access Cosmos DB, we're going to hit some error, right? And the error that we were trying to actually hit is actually going to be called being the fact that, we are not connecting securely to our database right now. So we could go to firewall, and then, in here, we can open, to selected ports. so that not everyone is able to make API requests right now into my database. All right. So I could click on add my current IP address, and then I will add that particular IP address over here, right? So you can see it in here. Then I could just click on save to save this particular IP address. So that was a good question. You have to make sure that you are opening it to specific endpoints. But because I'm actually in a development mode, that's why I added this. When I'm going on production, which is pushing my code online, I'll make sure I don't, I delete this. Okay. So that's a good question there.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this session.
Welcome.
Yes, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I hope I wasn't too much speed, like Flash.
No, it was perfect.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So I suppose if there is any question in the chat, I can answer it, but I think our time is actually up. I'm always available online. I'm happy to do this. You can connect with me. Thanks to everyone who joined in. Thanks to Hank, the Azure Thursday, and also Maxim and everyone else, Kathy, and all my folks on MSP.
Thank you,
very much. And enjoy your next year of being an MVP.
Thank you so much. I would love to, come here before I end my term again. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was great. That was a good kickoff of this Azure meetup. And I see a lot of questions in the chat. And the good thing is that the chat is also answering the questions instantly. So that's perfect. So I think it is time to invite Scott to the conversation now.
Let's do that.
Hello.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I saw on Twitter that you're doing a series of videos, right?
I felt that there were some things that were not being said when teaching people Git. And I've seen a lot of tutorials on how to use Git, but I don't like them. So when the children are asleep and my wife is working late at the hospital, I figured I would just sit down and record new, fresh tutorials, and people keep asking more questions. So I keep recording more tutorials, and I'm having a good time. Apparently making YouTube videos is my hobby now.
Yeah, it is fun. Yeah, I'm working on it as well, but I'm still starting. Yeah. So how many videos did you record about Git now?
Well, so far 2 videos in 2 days, but it's part of a larger 5-video series called Things They Didn't Teach You About Computers in School.
Okay, nice. I will definitely check them out when I have some time. In this session, you're going to talk about how you moved your 17-year-old blog to Azure.
I'm in the process of moving it. Exactly.
Oh, you're still doing it.
I'll show you. I have it in staging right now.
Nice, nice. Do you have enough time? 1 hour, is that enough for your whole story?
I never know. It could be 20 minutes, it could be an hour, but I would appreciate if there are live questions, if either you or Hank would interrupt and share those questions with me, because it propels me forward.
Okay, yeah, we will do that.
I appreciate it.
Then I won't take any more of your time. Show us.
All right, let's do my best. All right, share screen, sharing screen, and here we go. So we'll pop up this screen here. Boom. All right, friends. Just an FYI, my name is Scott Hanselman, and you can find me up here at hanselman.com. And another reminder is that I have a podcast. My last name is Hanselman, like Hansel and Gretel, and my podcast is called Hansel Minutes. And this show has been going on for over 740 episodes. And it's got lots of fresh faces from all over the world talking about technology. Now, all of this stuff that I do is a side hustle. This is not part of my job at Microsoft. Both the podcast at Hansel Minutes and the hanselman.com main website and the blog are all mini sites, mini websites that are part of my whole company. It's not really a company. And the blog itself is very old. We're looking at 18-year-old software. If I click on the date here, and I can zoom in, you see that we've started in 2002. And this software was written in .NET 2.0. And that's quite old and a little bit, a little crusty. It's starting to feel the weight of technology pressing on it. I've been blogging every Tuesday and Thursday for the last almost 20 years. But I notice when I visit some of these URLs that they're ugly. Look at this. It's hard to read. It has an extension. Sometimes people will tease me about these URLs. And that URL shows the technology. It's giving away the technology. It's advertising the technology. And that's not ideal. Also, this old blog is running on a virtual machine, on a VM. And that virtual machine is starting to get old also. So I wanted to move this into the cloud. But I started to realize that some of the decisions that I made 20 years ago when we created this blog were not really modern decisions, modern techniques. This is based on a technology that is called Das Blog, DAS blog. It's German for the blog, Das Blog. And it was originally made by a gentleman named Clemens. And now it's being managed by Mark Downey. Mark Downey and I are moving it to the future. And I wanted to be able to move this website to the new technology, but there's some complications. I'm going to go onto my hard drive here and show you where this content is stored. And you'll notice that this might make you sad. There are almost 5,000 XML files sitting in a folder. Every one of these represents a blog post over the last 20 years or a comment. This is not a database. It's not a very clean or organized way to present information, but it was good in 2002. It's weird in 2020. But it's what I have, so I'm going to use this and try to bring it forward. It's in a folder called Content, right here. And this is another weird decision that we made because I've got my binaries, my code, and my images, and my scripts, and the content all mixed together in this pile. It's not cleanly separated. That's one problem. It's also using, as I said, an old technology, these ASPX pages. That's ASP.NET active server pages. And that's a technology that a lot of people aren't using. They use ASP.NET Core, which is the latest version of that. So I have a storage problem. I have a language problem. I have an architectural problem. All of this I want to try to solve. I also need to do it in a way that doesn't break any of these existing URLs. So if someone visits this location in the future on the new system, what's going to happen to that URL? Well, right now I have this running in staging. So you see where it says www. I'm going to change that. I'm going to put in the word staging. This is my website, Living in Azure. I'll hit enter, and I want you to watch the URL. All right. Now you see that it has a nice changed URL. That's called kebab case, like a shish kebab. And that kebab case is easier to read. It's a nicer style. It's more modern. It also doesn't have that unusual extension there. This here is running on the new software. So that allows me a nice, clean migration path. So that's the first thing that we did. The second thing was looking at the software for DOS Blog and deciding what could be brought from 20 years ago and what needed to be rewritten from scratch. I'm going to load up Visual Studio, and we'll look at that code in just a moment here. It's starting on another monitor, and I'm going to bring it over to this monitor. One moment. My computer is working hard. Here we go. Okay. So if you're not familiar with C#, the language that we used for this website has the modern C# that we use in .NET Core, and then some legacy projects. What we found was that we could compile these projects, these older 20-year-old projects, using a thing called the .NET Standard. That allowed us to simply bring 20-year-old code forward, compile it with the new stuff, and then consume it with our new website. So we wrote the website from scratch, but we kept the core engine. That core engine worked very well, and the reason that we didn't rewrite it was that it worked. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Then we have themes, and those themes I'm allowed to change as I like. I'll show you one of those. And this is a .NET technology, but you'll notice that these purple tags, these purple elements, do not look like HTML. Those purple elements are called tag helpers, and they allows us to compose our markup, our code very cleanly. And this meant that I could just copy my existing themes over, and that made the migration a lot smoother. Everywhere that is purple, the custom tag helper. All right. So that was the code. Now let's switch over to the cloud for a moment.
Hi, Scott.
Yes, sir.
Questions are coming in.
Lovely.
So Willem is asking, or is actually curious, how big your code base is.
In lines of code, let's see, probably several thousands or tens of thousands. It's a non-trivial code base. You can go up and look at that. I don't think I have a measuring thing right now, but we could maybe ask. Let's see. Counting lines of code, command line. There's about 10 different ways to do this. LOC is the tool. And there's a copy on the releases page here. Windows, Windows, Windows. Why not just do it? There we go. So here I'll take this executable and I'll stick it in my utility folder. And then I'll come out to the command line. Let's go over to that folder. 121,000 lines, 40,000 lines of C#, 25,000 lines, 23,000 lines of JavaScript. Razor is considered its own language, even though it's C#. So 43,000 lines and change. There you go. Does that answer that question?
I think so. We will find out in 40 seconds with the delay on the stream.
I see. I'm actually kind of impressed with myself that I was able to find that utility and run it like that.
Really, really good. Then Roland has had another question, and he was asking how you're managing your secrets.
Oh, so secrets are an interesting one. If we go back to the cloud and we look at that, most of those secrets can be put into the Azure configuration. So if we hit a website in Azure, and we go into configuration and look at our settings, these are hidden values. There's multiple ways to manage secrets in the cloud, and they're varying levels of secret. If something is really secret, then you put it in a thing called Key Vault. And Azure Key Vault would allow you to have secrets as a service. You ask for the secrets when you need them. For things that are kind of secret, a little bit secret, you can put them in configuration and they'll appear as environment variables. So these are variables that I can pluck out of the environment. And those are about all I need for the secrets I'm using here. Nothing super secret. Remember, there's no database. This is an unusual architecture. So without a database, there's less need for a secret.
Exactly, yeah. And you can also set those secrets for your different environments using Azure DevOps. And
That's
so
a great point. So you're calling out the fact that there's different environments. And in this case, I was looking at staging, right? Staging. I have dev, development, staging, and production as different environments with themselves different secrets. All right, cool. Any other questions, sir?
Oh, they're coming in a lot.
Oh, lovely. Well, let's throw them out.
The question here was from Bashir. What is the CI/CD process for this code base like?
All right. So CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, is an interesting one because there's options. There's two different aspects for that. There's how Mark does it, and he's using Azure DevOps. You can see he's got Linux and he's got Windows. And you can click on those if you wanted to and go and look at that process. And then you've got my stuff, which might be different. So here's Mark doing his inside of Azure DevOps. I will go into my own and show you where that is deploying. Logging in. I've got the main Hanselman website, which we haven't discussed yet, the podcast website, and then the blog itself. Each of these currently is managed inside of Azure DevOps, and it's a very straightforward process. And you can see he's actually created, if I can go and find, there's a, what's it called? What's that thing called, Hank? Pipelines?
The Azure Pipeline.
Azure Pipeline YAML, YML. The YAML files for all of these things exist. If I go to my own GitHub, I'll show you my own, which is here. There we go, Azure Pipelines.yaml. Pretty straightforward. Using Ubuntu, using Linux, picking a version of .NET. One thing that I do that's interesting from a DevOps perspective, and I've written about this on my blog, is I output the build number, the version number of the build. So if you go to something like Hansel Minutes, and we scroll to the very bottom, look at this. It actually says the version and the commit and the build, and then I can click on those, see exactly what code was committed and exactly the moment it happened.
And you're never confused of which version is on.
Never confused, exactly.
Especially when you're developing.
Right, and I've written about that. If you search for Hanselman commit, I'm pretty sure, there we go. Adding a git commit hash and a build ID, and I walk you through the process and how that's done. It's quite clean. It'll take you a couple of hours or an hour, and I walk you through the whole process.
Oh,
that's very, very helpful.
And so I started, what was it? I think a week ago with GitHub Actions. Can you also deploy it the same way with GitHub Actions? or do you really need Azure DevOps for this?
No, so GitHub Actions has its own support for .NET, and it works just fine. That's the nice thing about doing this work in .NET if you're not familiar with .NET. For example, if I go over to my podcast website, I've got it all running in Docker. So if it runs in Docker, it runs anywhere.
Yep.
So if I say Docker build on my podcast, I'm running a build right now on my local machine. I'm using WSL, the Windows subsystem for Linux, and WSL allows me to have a real Linux environment on Windows. And I'm even running unit tests. So those unit tests are happening. There you go.
So Roland, there is your question answered. They're here.
And I can put that into the cloud. So let's back up. Let's up level for a moment. I had a 20-year-old Windows application. Step 1, get it running on Linux, right? Step 2, get it running in a container. Step 3, put that container in the cloud. And then start thinking about some of those architectural issues that we were mentioning. So this issue I mentioned before about the silly number of files. People may have an opinion about this and feel that this is a bad idea, but in fact, it's the decision that I have made, so what can I do, right? Well, what I was able to do, because I moved this into a container, I think was quite clever. Let's go to configuration, and I'm going to click on path mappings. And this is a really, really important thing for Azure people to think about. If you have an older application that makes an assumption about where it puts things, remember how I was sad that I put all of my blog files in a folder called content? Well, I can remap that folder. I can move that folder and point it to another location. So in this case, my application, my 20-year-old application, doesn't know about the cloud. It's had its path, its location here, remapped, moved, and now it points to Azure Storage. So it's actually a lie, but it's a friendly lie that makes my application work very well in the cloud. And I didn't have to write any code to do it. I just remapped a path. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I will collect more questions and let you continue with your story. But before I do that, Mohammed asked, how did you got Windows Terminal look so nice?
How did we get the terminal look so pretty? So this is my prompt down here. And when you have a terminal, like Windows Terminal, you can make this look like anything you want. You see it has my name, my computer name, my path. This is called a glyph. This right here is a glyph. It's a special thing called a power line glyph. If you search for Hanselman Pretty Prompt, I've made a blog post explaining how to get these glyphs. And these are actually built into a font. If you zoom in here, let me zoom. You can see how this background is black and this is a different color of black. So the glyph doesn't look nice, but it shows you that that's actually a character right there. So it's kind of simulating that process. It looks really nice, and it's a combination of fonts and then configuring your prompt. But you'll notice what happens if you don't have the right font. You just get a square. It says, hey, I don't have that character. I don't have that glyph. So the font contains lots and lots of glyphs, and it's called the Powerline glyph. And I walk you through the whole process.
I'm very sorry to interrupt, but we're having some technical issues right now.
Oh.
Stream down. Yeah.
The stream itself?
Yeah. site. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Azure Media Services. But we are still on YouTube.
Okay. Let's redirect everyone to YouTube.
Tell in the chat we will be back.
Event not started. I see it on the, I'm on events.azure Thursday right now.
Is it back again? It
I'm
says
looking at the site. If you look right here, there's us in the past.
Oh, and I'm there as well.
it is quite weird. That's the
So maybe it's overseas.
because yeah.
I would try encouraging them to
Media
refresh
services.
because it hasn't gone down here. Nope, they says that they're back.
Okay.
Maybe it's
Okay.
just a hiccup.
Let's hope so. Okay. Everyone's waiting for a handsome minute, so this is
It's all
coming.
good. It's all good, my friends. Reload does not work.
I don't get it back.
Yes, why don't we tell them the YouTube?
I need 1 second to put in the new streaming URL.
All right, friends. Thanks for your patience.
Let's go in the chat.
So refresh is working for some people and other people are getting...
Yeah, because I need to go and update my manifest file.
We're in the wrong region, I guess.
And this is all live on YouTube. I was figuring out that it doesn't work on our website.
Works here.
And so what Azure Media Service does is it goes back in the past.
This is a classic works on my machine situation.
So Azure Media Services is broken.
Some other people are saying it might be their browser.
Because I did the JavaScript, so...
Switch to YouTube. It's browser dependent.
And they are right, because Edge is working.
Classic. Works on my machine. Situation.
All right. Well, are you going to edit this, or do we get to see all of this backstage fun?
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to enable that we can post URLs in the chat.
It looks like
Browser dependent.
I'm going to
Because
allow sharing of URLs. Save.
all right. Well, are you going to edit this, or do
Great.
we get to all of this back?
YouTube is there. So what I'm going to enable.
while you're doing that, Dawood is asking a question in the chat, so let's see what he has to say.
I'm going to allow sharing of URLs. Save.
Well, are you going to edit this?
While we're waiting for our technical issues to be fixed, want to say again, thank you very much to our friends for having me, and also to our friend Billy Sanders. I'm a big fan. I did not realize this was the Billy Sanders because he actually has interpreted for a friend of mine in her show and a number of gospel shows that I've watched. So much respect for our ASL interpreter for his hard work today. Have we solved our problem, Henk?
I've posted the YouTube link, so I hope everyone's reading the chat and is going to move to YouTube.
Okay. So do you think we should continue, sir?
Absolutely. Let's do that.
All right. Do you see any questions that are not related to the technical difficulties?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Cool. I will continue and we'll do our best. Okay. Cool. So we were talking about the prompt. We were looking at the prompt and seeing the path. And over here, we see the branch for our repository, our source code branch. And then this is an interesting one here. If we zoom in on that extra close, what's going on here? We have a +3 that's saying 3 files have been added, 7 files have been changed, and no files have been removed. So that's a status bar. And if I say status, we can see 7 files have been modified. There's 3 potentially new files, and nothing's been removed. If I go to another folder, we can see it turned green, and that's showing me that that's a clean repository. So that is all of the cool information that you get from your prompt there. It makes life a lot easier. Returning back to our podcast site, which is being moved into the cloud as well, I wanted to showcase the fact that I have these scripts. And these scripts are written in PowerShell. And these PowerShell scripts are interesting because PowerShell works on both Windows and Linux. Now this here, I'm going to zoom in again, is the script. It's very simple. It just says Docker build. But look at this line right here. If you're not familiar with Linux, you may not recognize that line. This first bit here is called a shebang, S-H-E, bang. And a shebang, the bang is the exclamation point. A shebang is a line of code that tells the operating system how to run that script. What's cool about this is that this first line here tells Linux, I can run that script. Now, how do you run that script on Windows? The extension. I want to juxtapose the extension is used on Windows, the shebang is used on Linux. And that's interesting because it allows me to run these scripts in 2 different places. And that makes it more flexible for me to deploy this into the cloud. So I can say build, and that worked on Windows. And then I could switch over to Linux, and I could run that exact same script because here I also have PowerShell. So this is Linux right here. I can prove it to you, Linux. And this is Windows. And that's important because I want to be able to deploy into the cloud with choice. I want to be able to deploy with choice. And the reason that that's important is that choice saves me money. I'm paying for all of this with my own money, and I don't want to pay more than is necessary. So I have 2 different server farms in the cloud here. One is Windows and one is Linux. The Linux one costs 30% less, and that 30% less makes a huge difference. So I'm currently in the process of moving my applications to Linux. I have 19 websites in the cloud, 14 on Windows, 5 on Linux. You can see that I've moved them over, and I'm continuing to move them over in order to save money. I think I'll be able to save a lot of money because I can go here and see that only 50% of the memory is being used on that machine, and only about 9% of the CPU of the processor. That means I have headroom. I've got space to grow, and I can put more stuff on that machine, and that's going to make me successful, and it won't cost me any more money, and that's really significant. Oftentimes, we see computers not working hard in the cloud, and I think to myself, you're wasting money. In this case here, I'd like to be able to move everything over to Linux and pay as little as possible, and that's important. Now, this dashboard that we saw on the home page is a dashboard that shows me everything that's happening on my websites right now. I can see how many users are live right now on my website. And more interestingly, I can see the response time. I can see these little spikes. Usually my response time is a few milliseconds, but every once in a while it hits 20 milliseconds. That might be something I'd want to explore. But for the most part, my site runs well and it doesn't have too much of an issue. And I'm able to run 19 websites for a couple $100, which is pretty sweet. And I won't have to pay any more. And you'll look right here, the Linux part of the website is really only $43. So I feel like I'm getting a good value because I'm working the computers as hard as I possibly can. Currently, the thing that's keeping me from switching my main system over to the new system is probably fear. I've got about 5,000 blog posts and a lot of information, and I just want to keep testing. So for example, we look at this URL again, the old style. I want to change that URL to say staging, hit enter. And you notice we switched to kebab case. It seems to be working, but I need to test it under load. I need a lot of people to hit this machine and see if it will hold up before I'm ready to switch over. When I do switch over, this staging is going to change and become production. It'll become www. When I do that, we'll be using a thing that's called Azure Front Door. Luke Meger is asking, are you using container orchestration for your containers? I'm not using any container orchestration yet. What I'm doing right now is primarily just using Azure App Services, and I'm using Azure Front Door. The front door is literally the front door for your website. Somebody knocks on the front door, and then we tell them where to go. So in this case, someone hits staging, they are sent to the blog, and then depending on what URL they hit, they are routed to the correct location. Azure Front Door is a little bit expensive. You could also use Cloudflare, and Cloudflare is a similar front door for your website. But I have found this to be quite helpful. And it's allowed me to test my website. So if I hit staging, that's the home page for staging. But you can see I still have a few problems where it says not secure, right? So I need to think about my certificates to make sure that I get that nice lock that we all expect to see. For example, I would have preferred that that lock appear on its own and I would get a redirect. Here I'm getting it, but there's a little bit of a bug there. I'm trying to fix those small bugs by looking at the rules inside of Front Door and trying to enable them. But I'm still not quite there yet. And you'll notice it's giving me some warnings. But yeah, I am not using container orchestration. So that's a good question. Maybe Hank will see if we have any other questions in the chat. One of the things, Sukje is asking, is Front Door better than Application Gateway for this application? That's a good question. Let's find out. So Front Door on Azure versus Azure Application Gateway. Notice how Google auto-completed that. The reason that I wanted to Google for this is I wanted to show you that when you have a question and you say versus this versus that, and Google completes it for you, it means it's a good question because other people have asked the same question. If you go to the frequently asked questions for Front Door, there's actually a section here that says, what's the difference between the two? The fundamental difference is that Front Door is global and Application Gateway is regional. I wanted to go and do this at a global scale. I wanted anyone in the world to hit my website. So that's why I have moved all of that to Azure Front Door. However, Front Door doesn't work at a container level. So if I were to have multiple websites all over the world and I wanted to drain one of them of connections, I wanted to slowly have someone get off of that website and move to another. Front door is not good for that. So people tend to use them together. You would put the application gateway behind front door. But again, we have to ask ourselves, how much money do we have? Since I'm one person running one website and I only have $100, I don't want to spend a lot of money here. You're also asking, am I planning on documenting this transformation? That is a great question. I have been documenting that for a very long time. And unfortunately, the process has been happening now for almost a year. And again, I want to say it's because of fear that is preventing me from just turning the switch. I need to work through that fear, but I'm a little bit concerned that I'm going to break something. But I am working on that. One other thing I wanted to point out was the benefits of using a CDN, Content Distribution Network. These images that I have, and I have a lot of them, take up many gigabytes of space. So if we go to Hansel Minutes, for example, and we look at our episodes, these faces all come from a certain location. And if I go to this page and I scroll, you see there's hundreds of them. It turns out that this is a very heavy page. This is like a 10 megabyte page. An easy way for me to make this both lighter weight and also faster for my users is to put these on content distribution networks. So if I right click, you'll notice my URL says images dot whatever. That points to a CDN, and that means that those images are going to be given to my users from a location that is close to them. So if you're in Japan, you'll get that image served to you from Japan. That's thing number one. The second thing is, if I scroll fast, I'm going to just scroll fast one moment here. Watch. See the gray? That's because I only load images that appear inside the browser. I don't load the entire page until they enter the page. That also saved me money and got things working a lot faster. So that's something else to think about. These are all small things, but it saved a lot of money. Another question coming in here, what CDN am I using in Azure? If you go to CDN or Content Distribution Network profile, I'm using the standard Microsoft one. There's other options as well. I just picked the cheapest one. Again, I don't want to pay any money if I can avoid it. And when I picked that CDN, you'll notice my endpoints. And in this case, there's my custom website domain. So that's worked out really well. One of the interesting things about this entire process is that I'm just one person. But as I show you all of this, it feels like there's a whole team. And that's the thing that I find so exciting about the cloud, is the idea that we have power, even though we are one person. A 1 or 2 person shop has the power of a global network, as if there were 10 people working on this thing. A question from Jorit. Isn't Front Door a CDN as well? It is a kind of a CDN, yes, and it does cost a little bit more. It's about choice. You can pick one. Sangeeta is saying, when you update the content after migrating, what will the update look like? It's a good question. I use an application called Windows Live Writer, and Windows Live Writer is just a blogging tool. It calls an endpoint in my application, and it will just make XML files. It will make one of these. And when it makes that file, the blog will update. So I will switch over to staging. I'll make that become www. Let me rephrase. Staging will become production. And then when that happens, it should just redirect everyone to the new stuff. So have I faced any issues yet? Not yet, but we'll see. As I said, I'm a little bit afraid, so I've just been running it in staging for now. These are really good questions. Any other questions, my friends? Hank, you want to jump in and join me here as we end the hour?
Yes, of course. We had the last question, right? How updating the content look like?
Yes, it should just work exactly the same as before. This tool here calls a web service, and you can see these are the last few blogs that I wrote, and this is a front end client that lets me talk to my blog, and I'll just continue to use it, and it'll point to the same location as before.
Nice. So I think maybe it is good to share a Git trick, what you've been talking about in your videos.
Oh, yes.
Last 10
So
minutes.
if we go
Or
to...
maybe even show how you can rename a branch, which is a hot topic at the moment.
Well, if we go to my my YouTube, I have a playlist that's called Computer Stuff They Didn't Teach You. I'm going to skip this ad here. There we go. There's me last night. And I talk about a number of different things, and the last two have been about Git basics and Git pull requests. So I talk about those issues in those two videos. They're quite short. They're somewhat short, but they're very dense. There's a lot of information there. So I would encourage you to check those out. And if you're interested in renaming your branches, I've written an article about how to rename your branches, if that makes you happy. So lots of stuff. Basically, go to my blog and explore, because there's a ton of content up there.
Nice. And then when is the new version going to be live?
I don't know. Again, I've said it before. I'm nervous. I need a vacation weekend, and then maybe I'll use that weekend to go the final moment, the final step.
Yeah. Let's add
Is the final architecture good? Yes, the final architecture has held up because I had unit tests. It's gone well.
That is cool. So everyone that is watching the stream can win some Lego today. So,
Lego?
Yeah, Lego. We have a sponsor, Squared Up. It's a company in London, or in the UK. I don't know if they're in London. They're in the UK. And they've given us 5 Star Wars boxes to share. And I can put an image, this one. And the thing you have to do for that is to collect all the secrets that are going through the bottom of the stream. So we already had one at Dawood. We have one I'm just going to show you now really quickly. Have you seen it? And there is going to come up next one during the talk from Carol. Sjoukje, do we have more questions for Scott?
There's one more question from Luke. Do you go further with sentiment analysis on this blog?
I don't go through and look at the comments and look at their sentiment. I mean, it's a blog. I don't think it needs machine learning. I suppose I could do that, but right now it's just a 20-year-old diary.
Okay, fair.
Sure.
If you're planning on going live, I think we all would love to help you and test your blog.
I'm sure you would all happily hit my blog and make it knock over with traffic. But yeah, I'll come asking soon once I figure this whole process out.
Okay. It looks very great. Using a lot of great services. Really, really awesome.
Trying to make it work and have it save money.
Yes. That's the end goal of it. Yeah. Nice.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here and for this interesting session.
Cool.
Thank you. Yes, and then we're a little bit ahead of time now. So I think we can just start with the session if Carol is there. I will remove Scott's screen. So this is your last chance to ask questions in the chat for Scott. We will have to give them 40 seconds because that is the delay on the stream. Okay. But in the meanwhile, we can invite Carol in the stream.
Hi.
Hi, Carol. How are you
Yeah.
doing today?
Good, how are you?
So, we have seen that Scott is migrating his blog, but I know you from the Umbraco community.
Yes, so that's how we know each other. And I've actually just been redoing my blog on Umbraco from 7 to 8 and just migrating over content now. But yeah, also in the process of upgrading.
Nice. So, can you tell a little bit about yourself? Who you are, where you're from, what do you do?
I am from Glasgow in Scotland in the UK. I'll try and speak as slow as possible because I realise that Glaswegians speak really quick. And I'm a developer and development team lead at an agency. So I mostly work in the .NET stack. And I organise a couple of meetups, and I'm just generally really interested in development communities.
Which meetups do you do?
I have a slide on this, but yeah, Ladies of Code Glasgow. And so we've had a meetup going for 3 or 4 years now, every month. And the Glasgow Umbraco meetup too, of course. And I'm also part of Scottish Developers, so we organised DDD Scotland a few years ago. We'll need to do another one soon.
Let's hope we can do that soon again. That would
Yeah.
be great. So, what are you going to show us today?
We are going to have a look at getting started with Blazor. And for me, it is a getting started. As a .NET developer, I'm a C# developer, but I haven't done any Blazor for production. I haven't done any real life, if we call it that, Blazor development. This is just me having a bit of fun and seeing what we can do with Blazor.
Perfect. I haven't seen anything of it so far, so that will be really interesting.
Okay, good.
There will be one extra code, secret code, during your talk. Try not to laugh about it. And let's get started. You can share your screen.
Okay.
Then I think we say goodbye to Scott. Thank you.
Scott. That was awesome. No pressure going right after Scott. Can you all see my screen?
No, because I have to click a button. And there we go.
Great, thanks.
Take it away.
Thank you. If you have any questions or if I speak too quick or anything, just comment in the chat and I'll try and have a look for that. So yeah, let's get started. If it will let me skip slides. Yep, so that's me, obviously. I'm Carol. I'm a development team lead and I am from Glasgow, and you can get me on Twitter or GitHub or any of the socials on CR Grief. And my own site, the blog that I've just moved over, is on carol.dev. And as I just mentioned, Hank, I'm a meetup organizer for Ladies of Code Glasgow and for the Glasgow Umbraco meetup. And for the next little while, they're all going to be virtual. So if anyone wants to join us as a speaker or just to come along and say hello and see the awesome stuff we have to show, then you can sign up on meetup. And I don't feel bad about advertising my podcast now because Scott done the same. But me and 3 friends, Emma, Laura, and Lottie, host a podcast about open source and our experience as kind of active members of an open source community, and it's called Candid Contributions. So it'd be great if you have any feedback or any ideas for us to talk about for open source. So I wanted to give a little bit of history of, if this is me getting started with Blazor as a .NET developer, I thought it would be cool to talk about the history of my experience with C# and .NET. So I started about 5-6 years ago. I was a Java dev for a few years before that and switched over to .NET. So I was lucky, I guess, where I came in just after web forms. Didn't really have to do too much web forms. And I mostly came in as MVC was already up and running. So I found that most of the applications I was working with were .NET MVC. And then as the years went on, I found that more and more, so I guess I should have explained, I'm a back-end developer much more than I'm comfortable with front end. So I found that more as a back-end developer, I was doing more web API. and I was creating endpoints for the data that then front-end developers for any dynamic content or any dynamic processes would then be doing in Angular and React or good old plain JavaScript. So I thought it would be interesting to see what the future looks like. So part of my job as a tech lead is keeping an eye on what might the next thing be that we do. And Blazor kind of caught my eye because you can do, we'll be going to talk about it, but you can do some of these cool dynamic things you can do in Angular or React, but in Blazor and in C#, which as a backend dev, really was a good thing for me. So Blazor is an HTML framework, much like Angular or React or Vue, and it's used for rendering .NET on the client side and runs under WebAssembly, which we will chat about later. And it offers all the benefits of a modern front-end framework while working entirely in C#. So that working entirely in C# for me was like music to my ears. I can do some JavaScript, but it's not where I'm most comfortable. It doesn't come as naturally to me, as much as coding comes naturally to anyone, but you know what I mean. So for me, this was very much me. I was keeping up with JavaScript frameworks. I was constantly trying to, keep up with Vue. Was it React? Is it Angular? And trying to keep up. When I found out I could do C# but have it rendered in the browser, I was like Drake in the second photo there. So the advantages for me, and these actually come right off the Microsoft docs, is you can write C# instead of JavaScript. You can leverage the existing .NET ecosystem of libraries. So I think Scott mentioned earlier, being able to write things in .NET Standard and have them be kind of transferable between the technology. So if you already have some libraries that you work with in .NET Core or maybe even Xamarin, you can utilize those in Blazor as well. So as much as it's a new framework, you can build upon all of these packages and libraries that you know and love and you trust, which is really important. So yeah, you can share logic across the server and the client. You can use the same libraries both in server and client. And they've got the performance, reliability, and security of .NET. And it's on a common set of languages and frameworks and tools that are stable, which is really important when you're learning a new framework. So it ticked enough boxes for me to decide, yeah, that I'll give it a go. So the main difference, when you first look into Blazor, you'll immediately come across the question of, well, is it client-side Blazor or is it server-side Blazor? So server-side Blazor, I think, has been out since last year, where client-side was still in beta until, I think, maybe February, March. I can't remember, but this year anyway. So it's much newer. So to have an initial look, the first one we'll have a look is at Blazor client-side. So all of the C# code and the Razor files are compiled into .NET libraries, and it's those that are downloaded to the browser. So we'll have a look later, but when you go to the Networks tab in Chrome, you'll see that it downloads those DLLs. And then Blazor client-side bootstraps the .NET runtime and configures the runtime to load the assemblies for the app. And it then uses a JavaScript interop, which I'll explain in a second, to handle all the DOM manipulation. So it's all done client-side. So here's a lovely picture from the Microsoft docs. I can't take credit for that. You'll notice that everything here is within this browser. So WebAssembly, for folks who don't know, sometimes it's kind of by its abbreviation there, is the compact bytecode for optimized fast download and maximum execution speed. So it's an open web standard that's supported across the web browsers without plugins, but I think it is the newer versions of the browser. So maybe not, older versions of IE or anything. But yeah, it's a kind of standard across browsers that should work across all of them. And the JavaScript interop lets the WebAssembly code can access the full functionality of the browser via JavaScript. So all this .NET code that you're executing via WebAssembly is actually running in the JavaScript sandbox. And that kind of explains a little bit how it can do all this .NET stuff, but in the browser without having to hit the server. So server side, just to show the other side of it, provides support for hosting Razor components on the server in a .NET Core app. And the UI updates are handled over a Signal R connection, which I'll show an updated diagram for that in a second. That will explain. And the runtime handles the sending of the UI events from the browser to the server, and it applies those updates to the DOM using that connection. And again, it can also handle, it uses the JavaScript interop to make sure we can get this kind of browser functionality, but from your .NET code. So Signal R, for folks who don't know, is an open source library that simplifies the real-time web functionality to apps. So it lets you get that kind of single page app type functionality. It doesn't have to do a full page reload every time. It can go to the server, come back and dynamically update your site. So again, here's a nice diagram from Microsoft. And it shows here that it's got the browser on one side, and that's where your DOM lives. And on the other side, communicating with Signal R is your .NET Core app. That's where your Razor components are. That's where your .NET code is run. So although you get the single page app functionality where it dynamically updates the DOM, it still has to hit the server in the background. And again, if you open up DevTools and have a look in the Network tab, you'll see that the data go back and forth in there. So hopefully that's a nice, quick introduction. So let's have a look. I thought we'll also do some live coding and have a look at what we can do. So if I open up Visual Studio, and I thought I would show, let me get the browser out the way there. Oh, you can see my cat. I thought I'd show just brand new, file new, how easily, and I don't use that term loosely. I don't want to be one of those people that's like, oh, hey, you just do this. I want to show how quickly you really can get started with Blazor. So if we open Visual Studio and we say create new project, and you'll see here, you can choose Blazor app. So if we choose Blazor, and I call it Azure Thursday. No typos yet, that's good. Live coding is always fun. So if I do create, and it will come up in a second, just asking me, great, so do I want a server side or a WebAssembly app? So I thought I'd show the WebAssembly one, since this is the newer one that's just out of beta, so I thought I'd have a look here. We'll do create. And it's usually pretty quick, but obviously live demos, so we'll see how quick it goes. It's opened in another window. Here we go. So when this is a brand new app, I will build quickly. We're storing some NuGet packages. Great, and hopefully soon it will give me the option to run it and show you how it works. But what I can do is have a little look around. So the first thing to have a little look at is in the main. So let's see how this actually runs. So it creates a WebAssembly host builder. So this is how it knows to run as a WebAssembly app. It adds the app, which will show you how that all hooks together. And you've got a HTTP client in here, which is great. So if we go to app.razor, and this is how it adds together the router, and it's basically, this is the stuff that it always does when you file new. I can't imagine you'd ever have to write this stuff. It's like when you do a file new MVC or a web API, it always adds it for you, right? You never have to really create it yourself. And if we have a look at the index, let's have a look here. So this is how Razor works, the Blazor works, sorry, and you'll see it's in a .razor file. If you do app page and then the route that you want it to be at, that's how the routing works. It's that simple. It says hello world, welcome to your new app, and this here starts to show you how you can use components. So I know a lot of the things that people really like about React, for example, is how simple it is to componentize, how you can like break down your code into components and then use it, just, you know, put it on a page much like this, just drop it in and it works. So this then pops in this component, which is a survey prompt. And when we run the app, you'll see it. It's # some HTML. And you'll notice here, this is the first time we'll see that you can actually dynamically put in code, C# code that you maybe traditionally would have had on the back end. So you can do it at code, and that's where you can have that. So let's have a look at how that runs. You can run it in IIS Express and Visual Studio. It'll just take a little second to load. Here it is. Just here we go. So this you'll start to recognize and know and love is the template that you get when you start up a Blazor app from file new. So this is the survey prompt component here that we saw, and you'll see that it's kind of dynamically put into the index page, and you've got your nav here, which I'll show you. So as I showed, we have the nav. So we have here, it's got the navigation, it's got those links that we saw, and it's also got a chunk of code, which again, it means that we can use the, if anyone's used MVC, you'll notice that it's really like just a regular Razor syntax for Blazor. So again, it's kind of helped on the learning curve. I've not had to learn a new syntax. Like whenever I've learned, say, Angular, and then I've learned React, I learned Vue, there's always slightly different syntax, whereas at least as a .NET developer who knows Razor, I've been able to jump right into Blazor.
Hi, Carol. Hi.
Hi.
Sorry for interrupting. Can you zoom a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
Because, yeah, we're on...
Does that help?
It's even more smaller, yeah.
No?
Yeah, I think this is good.
Yeah. Ah, okay, great. Sorry about that.
Never mind. Continue, please.
Thank you so much, Henk. And let's have a look at the layout. Let's zoom in on that one. And yeah, you'll see on the layout, it tells us to put the nav in, and then you've got your main part of the code, which was the section on the right that takes up about 80% of that. And you say it does at body, and that's how it knows which page to put out. So you will recognize some of the patterns from working with MVC and with Razor if you are a .NET MVC developer. So let's look at one that does something a bit more interesting. So this is the one from the demo that you get. Not survey prompt, it's counter. That's what I want to do. So we have a counter. So we have some HTML that has the current count. It does the at syntax, and that's how you can put in dynamic data. You do at and then the variable or the method name. And it puts the current count variable. And it also here in the button, when you on click, that calls the increment count function or method. So that in the at code section, it persists your value. It's got what the current value of that is, and it also has the method there to do current count plus plus, and it increments that. So if I put a breakpoint in here and run this in IIS Express, great. So I will leave both open for now. Hopefully it's big enough. So if I go to counter and click, no, it's not hitting my breakpoint. Okay, don't know why the debugger's not attached. But when I click me, oh, it is attached now. So when I do click me, it goes into this increment count function, because that is what we had on the on click, and it calls that method, it updates that variable, and when I click through that breakpoint, it comes back and it's 2. Click that again, go through the breakpoint, and predictably now it's 3. So that lets you kind of see how you can interact with your code, with your Blazor code, from your HTML, all within the one file. So what I thought I would show was how I then extended the file new Hello World style app. And I have one, here's one I made earlier. I can drag that onto my second screen. So what I thought I would do is, as I mentioned, me and my friends have a podcast, and I've recently implemented, I'll need to make this bigger, an API feed that it dynamically brings in our podcast episodes to our website. So I thought, I've already got the code to do that in C#. I'll try and use it in Blazor. Hopefully y'all can see that okay. So what I've done is I've created a new page called podcast.razor, and I'll try and zoom in a little bit again. So in the HTML, it's got a check that says to check if the podcast is empty or if it's null, and it'll do loading. And then otherwise it will do a for each, and it will loop through this podcast list and put out the title and also a link so that you can go and listen to it. And how that data gets populated is from this code here. So what I have is I've actually created the models for these on the back end. So I thought it might be a cool way to show the models are in my DLLs. They're in the back end code, but I can reference those from my Razor. So if I go in here, I have my podcast model, and I'll show you in a second the API and how these come through. But a title and a playback URL are the main ones that we're going to use. So I have my list of podcasts. We've got our on-initialized async, so that's on load of the page, really. And I've got the path for the API that I want to call. So what I think I'll do first is show you what the API looks like. So if I call this Postman, and see what data comes back. And I always find when I'm integrating with APIs, I always use Postman first and see what the data looks like, and then I can start to build for it. So you'll see our latest episode came out yesterday, and it's called Bias. So we've got the title and we've got the playback URL, and they're the two that I've integrated with my site. Oh, wrong window, this one. So yeah, we do a wait, we use a HTTP client, which I should have mentioned. I've injected that into my Razor page so that it knows to include that that library that I need to use, and it lets me make HTTP calls. So I could do get from JSON. I'm converting it to my API response model, which I have, and we call that API path. And I know that in my API response, I have the set of objects that lets me do response.items, and items is my list of episode model, and I'll just show you that there. I have my API response, and the response has got a list of items in it. So there you go. Okay, so let's have a look, see if it works. So I've got a few questions. What is the amount of data loaded in the browser using Blazor? Well, I guess, as with everything, it will depend how hard the site is working, you know, how big is the site. But I'll show for this one what it does in DevTools. Yeah, so that's a really, really good question about how do you get around the initial sizable load of all the dependencies. Do you think it will get smaller in the future? So I will, first of all, I'll show you what it does in browser. The first load, it does have to get all those DLLs, and then as you navigate around, it doesn't have to get them each time. They're kind of stored locally. And I was chatting to someone, I'm not sure if this is the case yet, but apparently a lot of those common maybe the system DLLs and that HTTP client DLL, they should be in a CDN, and that way, you know, if we've used them, hopefully, you know, if Blazor were to get more adopted, if we've used them before and then we go to another site that has to use them, we've used them before, and hopefully they can be cached. And a few more questions. This is server-side Blazor that I'm using just now. and a good way to be able to tell, you can tell in that program file that I showed, but also when you're in DevTools, when you open the network tab, like I mentioned, you'll see when it's client side, it's a lot less noisy after that initial load. It has to do a lot on the initial load, but it's a lot less noisy in the network traffic. Whereas when you are on server side and it has to do those SignalR calls, it's kind of constantly having to call back and polls for SignalR so that it knows whether to update the DOM or not. So that's kind of a quick trick to be able to have a look. But I would recommend if you do file new in Visual Studio, do file new WebAssembly, do a file new server side, and have a play with it. Like, you really can get started really quickly, and it lets you get a feel for the difference between the two. Maybe try and do the same thing in each app and see quite how differently you have to implement it. Spoilers, it's really similar. So I have done the same thing previously in both server side and client side, just as a bit of an experiment on how much I can reuse my code, and you can reuse lots of it. So that's good. So even if you decided to start off server side, but you re-architected and decided you want to do it client side, then you can still reuse a lot of that, both the Blazor code and the Razor files, but also your backend code too. So now that this is loaded, I will go to my podcast route. Hopefully it will load. Yeah. And there it loads in our episodes. It's got the episode name and it's got the link that you can link out and listen to it. So it worked. So to get a whole new route and to get it to go and call an API and pull all of this in, we only needed this much code, which I thought was pretty sweet. And as I said, I had some of the code for this on another repo, which is an Umbraco site. So it's not even .NET Core, but I was able to bring over my models and bring over some of my code for calling the API. So I thought that was really good. It kind of shows, yeah, you can reuse your .NET standard libraries, but you can just use a lot of your C# codes that you've already got to. So what I thought I would do is just have a quick look at showing how we can. Let's add this into the nav. So you saw in the Razor file that I made the app page /podcast. So that is my root. You saw that when I went to it in the browser. So let's add that to the nav. So how it does the routing is we have this nav link, which is a component, and you'll see the href there was counter for the counter example we showed earlier. Fetch data is another one that you get out of the box when you do file new. And I will make this one podcast. Do a nice headphones logo and make it can do contributions. Okay, I will build that. Is there any more questions? Is it possible to display some JavaScript in Blazor? I think so. I've not tried it, but I think once it renders a HTML, you should be able to use HTML too. Anything you would put in HTML or JavaScript. So it really is just a web app still. So you should be able to use the technologies that you already know and love, but in this. How does it work with dependency injection? Good question. You can. I've not got an example here, but you can. I think in the program CS, anything that you want to start up, you can add in some more services here. So you can, I think much like a lot of the .NET Core stuff now, it has some DI stuff built in, and you can add services in, and you can map from your interface and your service in here. But I don't have an example of a custom built one just now, but I have done in the past. And I'm going to link to, I'm going to show a link to some places that you can get a lot of resources and tutorials and stuff for Blazor. So hopefully there's an example in there. If I get around to it, I'll write a blog post about it. Okay, so I'm going to, that is built now. Yeah. I think your machine runs like 5 times slower when you're doing a live demo. Here we go. So it's got the usual hello world, and you'll see it's now added to the nav, my link, and it's now going to that route that I've built. So it is that kind of easy if we want to be able to add a new page, make it do something dynamic like calling an API, and also add it to the nav. I think they've made it really, they've done a really good job in this like starter kit when Visual Studio, when you do file new in Blazor project, to make it have some good examples that you can get started. The fetch data one also does like a mock API call. It just goes and gets data from a file locally, but again, shows you how to get started with data. So I would really recommend it, kind of file new project and just having a bit of a play around, because that's what I've done. I'm not an expert in it. I still very much new at it, but hopefully that was a quick tour on how we can get started with it as .NET developers. So I thought I would do a quick recap of what I've learned, because some of the main things when looking at a new framework for me isn't just how cool is the tech, but it is how sustainable is it? What is the community like? What are the docs like? So let's have a look. For me, one of the big things was it was quick to get started with. And I realised I had the advantage of being an experienced developer, an experienced .NET developer, an experienced C# developer. But I do think once you've got Visual Studio, they do make it quite easy for you to get started. But I do appreciate I was coming from a bit of a head start in terms of tech stack. This was more when I gave this talk before it was out of preview. It felt like every time I went back to my example or to revisit how Blazor works now, it was updated the way it works. So I don't know if any folks are .NET developers. It was a little bit like when .NET Core first started to come out. Each version, there were significant changes to where things lived or how they worked, which is fine because it was still in beta, and that's how things get good. People test them, people make them better. I think now that it's both server side and client side are out of beta, it's probably a bit more stable. But yeah, this was just when every time I would come to it for a bit, I had a free weekend, would spend some time with it, and then maybe a few months later would come back to it and everything was different. But hey, that's how it works when you're using new technology, right? The dev community. For me, as I've mentioned before, I'm really interested in dev communities. I've got a lot of friends from dev communities, and it's how I learn. And it's how, when I choose a technology, I want to make sure it's got a strong community behind it, because selfishly, it means it's really easy to get help and to find documentation. And one thing I found really cool for Blazor is it's a GitHub repo actually, and it's called Awesome Blazor, and it's people have posted loads and loads of links to, I've got it open, I think, yeah, to different libraries that you can do. So here's one. You can do authentication with Blazor, CMSs with Blazor, maps. People have built kind of components, people have done tutorials. There's just so much help out there. Some of it will be server side, some of it will be client side, but I just find this really cool. It's an open source repo. You can contribute to it. It's on GitHub, and I just like, I think it's awesome to see, even before it was out, when it was still in beta, like this awesome Blazor page was really active, and to me that's a good sign of a strong community. I should say as well, the Microsoft docs, obviously I mentioned earlier, I stole some of the diagrams from there. The Microsoft docs are really, really good. And again, documentation is important. I think when you're looking at a new technology or a new framework, if you look at documentation and it's out of date, you're probably not going to choose it to be your framework for, a work project to go into production. hosting. So when you do publish in Visual Studio, you get all of these options. You can do it Azure, you can do it in a Docker container. What's really cool, folks will probably already know, or maybe already know, that .NET Core you can host anywhere. You can host it in Linux, not just Windows, which is great. One thing I think is really cool about Blazor is you can host the WebAssembly version statically, so you can host it really anywhere. So instead of showing an Azure example in the Azure meetup, I thought I would follow, there's this cool tutorial that I can maybe post the link to, hosting a Blazor WebAssembly app and GitHub pages, which I thought was really cool. It's like, really, you don't have any hosting costs. You can host it in your GitHub repo for free. So I have done this. So this is the tutorial that I used on dev.to. I think it's awesome. And I have an example here. So you'll see that this is on a GitHub pages URL for my repo. And it's the same example we looked at earlier. And we can have a look around. We can click our counter. We can see our homepage. So this is the app. It's doing the dynamic stuff. It's it's calling the C# code in the browser, and this is all on a static Blazor app and GitHub pages, which I think is really cool. So this is it hosted on the URL, and this is it in the repo. So you see, this isn't the full app that I had here, and it's not everything that I had here in my Visual Studio app. It's just the published pages. And that's what the published profiles can do in Visual Studio. So what I done was, if I go back to this slide, I chose folder. I published it to a local folder, and I used that folder to put that up into a GitHub repo, which is this one. So the blog post takes you through a few things you need to do to make it work in GitHub pages. One being that you have to add the 404 page and add a little snippet to your index HTML. Because it's a single page app, it kind of confuses GitHub pages a little bit, just to let it know how the routing works. So it only took a few minutes to add that in. The blog post makes it really helpful for you. Which I thought that was really cool. I thought it really makes it more inclusive of a technology. You can host it absolutely anywhere for free, which is great. As I've already mentioned, documentation for such a new framework, kind of for early, it said some early adoption, and there's lots of documentation there. So for me, I wanted to know what was next. Is it just a new framework, or is there more to build upon? And what I thought was cool was I saw that they've kind of started working on Blazor PWA, so Progressive Web App. Blazor Hybrid, to let you do some kind of hybrid app type stuff, and Blazor Native, which lets you do things, native to devices. So I guess React Native is quite a popular one, and hopefully this is what's trying to replicate that. So it's good to see that the Blazor team are trying to take it beyond just web and to make it a kind of full framework that we can use, hopefully on some other devices. And for me, what will be really, really important will be developer adoption of Blazor, because that's how a framework makes or breaks, really, isn't it? It's do people use it? Are people contributing back? It's Microsoft. It's part of the .NET, so it's open source. Is it an active open source community? Is it an active developer community? With folks blogging about it, doing videos about it, giving examples, and are there some really strong examples in production? Would be really good to know. That's kind of what helps me make a decision on whether I would use it in production, really. So for me, I had it way back at the start of my slides saying, is it the future? I'm not sure is the answer. I still need to keep a bit of an eye on it. I think I need to build some bigger apps with it, still just for fun, to see if it scales the way that I would want it to for a real client project. And for me, it's still at that early point where it could be, the new way of working. It could be, it could be the React and it's really adopted. It could be Silverlight or something like that that doesn't get adopted. So we'll see. Is my sitting on the fence answer. But it'd be really cool to hear if any of you all have used Blazor or plan to, and yeah, to start a conversation around it really. So yeah, if you want to chat about it, please do say hello on Twitter or ask any questions now. I think we have some questions. So that's me. Thank you so much, Henk and the team, for asking me to come along. And to Billy, hopefully my accent was understandable enough that you could yeah, it was all good.
Yeah,
Ideal.
yeah. Well, thank you very much. Very interesting session. I really
you.
like the syntax of Blazor. I'm a real C# developer, so I'm a big fan of it. Yeah. There
Awesome.
are a couple of questions though that we can ask. Martijn is asking, are the browser HTML capabilities like navigator.getUserMedia available in the C# Blazor code? Or do we need to keep using JavaScript for now?
Good question. I'm not sure, I'll be honest. But I think, as I mentioned to you, with it still being just HTML, CSS, and all the web technologies we use, I think if we do have to use the frameworks and the libraries that we like from JavaScript, I think we can, much like we do when we're doing an MVC app, we will still use JavaScript if we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a question from Vinesh. It was a bit back in your presentation, but he wants some insights of how routing works in Blazor. Is that also described on the awesome Blazor browser or the Microsoft documentation?
In the Microsoft documentation, and hopefully, I'm not sure if that was before or after I showed the example of how we can do the routes. So we can do, app page and add in the route to our .razor page, and then we can link to it, use it like I did in the nav example. I'm not sure if that's what you mean, but yeah, if a combination of trying out the kind of sample project and also using the documentation from Microsoft, and yeah, the awesome Blazor resources are really good because it's people are giving loads of examples of how they've built things beyond just the hello world type example.
Okay, nice. And do you think it's ready for commercial websites, keeping in mind the search engine scroll and indexing?
I'm not too sure. I'm not sure if I would use it just yet. For a site that I was leading the build of, but I'm really interested to see how it grows and to see some examples of how people do use it in production. I think for search engines crawling and stuff, I think single page apps not always, but they can have a bit of a challenge, being that they are a single page app. But yeah, much like they have that challenge with React or Vue or something, that yeah, something to think about.
Okay, great. I think that were all the questions. Maybe we missed some, but they are definitely in the chat, so maybe you can take a look.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that was a nice Azure Thursday, I think.
Definitely, yeah.
And that's the good thing of being online. We can have some speakers we normally would have never gotten on our local meetups.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, we really had some great speakers. All three of them, yeah.
Yes, so then I think the moment is almost here that we are going to close the form. I will show it for the last time on the screen.
Exciting.
So you can get your submissions in. And hopefully you've seen all the 3 codes.
They weren't very hard to miss, right?
Yeah, unless you were doing something else and not paying attention.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And the form is closed. And I have a list of people that submitted. I'm going to share my screen.
Ooh.
Do that with audio. A wheel of names. Let me download this from our chat. I'm pasting all the names that came in. You can all see your name. And if you see any duplicated one, that is not good. So we press shuffle a few times. And then we can pull the wheel. Woo! Yay! I thought it was going to make sound. So the first winner is Gopal, and it's on the list, and we will contact you by email in, I think, in an hour.
Congratulations.
That one is removed from the list, so let's do the next one.
Who will it be?
Yay.
Awesome. Congratulations with your prize.
Yes.
Awesome.
How much do we have? 5, right?
Yeah, we have 5.
Okay. 3 more chances.
Yeah.
Oh. Yes.
Woo! Paula, congratulations.
And on the list, Milan.
Wow.
Congratulations. And the last one.
Yeah.
Arno.
Congratulations, Arno.
Cool. Let me save this list here. Put it in the chat for us. So congratulations, all these things. I think Square Up is going to contact you for your shipping details, and we'll ship it to you. So let's go back. Do we have any final words to close today's Sjoukje?
I think it's difficult. We had so much great info and sessions and presentations. I'm very happy with this live stream. Yeah.
Yes, me too, except for the stream crashing.
Yeah.
But that only was because I found out why. So we're all technical and we're all running Azure. So it would be great to share that. So we were running Azure Media Services. And Azure Media Services, of course, works almost the same as YouTube. You send video in and it will transform it for you so you can play it in multiple formats in a player. So you have a streaming endpoint for that and you have to scale them. So you came with way too many people for my scaling setting to handle it. So it is all up to me. I should have dragged the bar a little bit further. But I think the great thing about Azure Media Services is that it comes out of the box with real-time captions. It can caption in English, in French, in Spanish, and like a lot of different languages.
And you can also see resolution. That is a great thing as well.
Yes. So for next month, I'm going to find out so you get per default a higher resolution and you can scale it back. And that it will not crash. I will just scale it up a little bit more. So that was it for me.
So we will not give up on Azure Media Services yet.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, cool.
I love the subtitles. Cool.
And are we going to have Billy the next time? Next time again?
Yeah, I think it is great. And I think it's really great to make these streams more accessible and make it available for every audience. So I'm going to invite him back. So Billy, for you, it is every first Thursday of the month around this time.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, then that's it for today. And I hope to see you all next week. Or next month, not next week.
Yes. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.